but we also didn't limit it just to 2 or 3 because I think there are some other very credible registries that just have maybe one breed in them. But they definitely have to maintain records, including birth and death.
Okay.
Then the next major change is under item 3, change the exemption procedures as it relates to obtaining a medical deferment, adding requirements and other details as deletions of lifetime exemptions. So what I'm going through are the changes to the Muni Code. So in the past, we had it so that a veterinarian could give a lifetime exemption from spay neuter and didn't always have to tell us exactly what the exemption related to, what health feature. So this just adds if the animal has not been spayed or neutered by the specified date and is not recommended for a lifetime exemption by the veterinarian for reasons of old age, permanent serious medical conditions, or permanent infirmity that would prevent the animal from reproducing, the owner must obtain a new letter in full compliance with this provision. And then and it must be updated periodically. The letter must also include evidence of applicable medical diagnosis to justify exemption, and that's totally new. We didn't require them to tell us why they were exempting them in the past.
And what's the time period now after 4 months?
Yes, up until 4 months, they don't have to be spayed or neutered necessarily, but after 4 months, yes. There was no increase in that age. There was some discussion of it, but it was not changed.
So what if a dog owner decides they'd like to wait an extra month? Do we prosecute them, or?
Well, actually, they'd have 45 days to comply if we cited them. So if we gave them a citation for not being in compliance, they would have 45 days to comply. So they would have another month and a half.
Okay, so if people were concerned about neutering an animal before
right.
5 months or whatever, they really wouldn't run into any great difficulty because they just have to neuter their animal.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, there is also, it says in here that they can get a 60-day extension from the vet if the dog reaches the age of 4 months, so that there's actually a 2-month window in here.
Okay, great.
So they're, they can go to 6 months if they're under veterinary care and the veterinarian really doesn't want to do the spay neuter early. And then the next major change is under number 5. The municipal code changes an unaltered dog or cat found running at large and impounded as a lost or stray animal may be required to be spayed or neutered before being redeemed by its owner or custodian. The owner or custodian shall have the option of having the procedure accomplished by the department in accordance with its accepted procedures, or having it accomplished by a private veterinarian of the owner's choice, with notification of completion of the procedure being provided to the department within 7 days. And that just means that you can use one of our vets, leave the animal there who was impounded stray, and we can take care of it, and you can pick it up spayed or neutered, or you can go to your own vet, but you have to notify us within 7 days. In the cases where the department directly undertakes a procedure, the current specified cost set by the department for the procedure shall be charged to the owner or custodian as part of the redemption process. However, if the animal is licensed and is being impounded for the first time, it may be redeemed by its owner or custodian without being spayed or neutered, providing that all of the applicable provisions of this section, including animals qualifying for an exemption or owner having a valid current breeding permit, are complied with. These provisions shall apply to any animals meeting the requirements described herein, notwithstanding any prior exemption status, with the exemption of animals meeting the provisions of Section 53.15.2b regarding medical exemptions. So basically, if they qualify for a breeding permit and they have one, if they have a license, then they may not be forced to have the animal spayed or neutered the first time it's found running at large.
Now, what do we do if someone's animal is 15 years old? We don't, I assume, and it's found stray, I assume we don't mandate that they neuter them.
Yeah, I think we would be.
Must be some requirements
eligible
there.
for a medical exemption. We would certainly talk to our veterinarians, and I would guess we would want an outside opinion on that as well, but it's not written in here.
Okay, should it be? Should we call out the fact that we're not going to require every animal to be spayed or neutered depending on rational circumstances?
We could have a long list. I mean, if we wanted to say that if an animal is found to be, over a certain age, but not all. I mean, I certainly have had 8-year-old dogs spayed in the past myself.
So can we just assume the department would use appropriate discretion
I think so.
in its requirements without having to call that out?
The veterinarians, our veterinarians do an examination on impound. So if the veterinarian said, and the person said, well, we wouldn't want to spay and neuter this animal, then I think we would have, a logical situation that we would go for medical exemption. Yeah.
Okay, that should be fine then.
Yeah. So the I lost my place. Oh, the owner or custodian of the unaltered animal shall be responsible for the established costs of impoundment, which include daily boarding costs, vaccinations, medication, and any other diagnostic or therapeutic applications as required. So that would actually answer that. Any fee that may be imposed shall be applicable to an owner or custodian who surrenders or fails to redeem an animal that is subject to this section if the owner or custodian fails to otherwise comply with applicable provisions of the code. All of these fees specifically associated with the impoundment may be waived at the department's discretion if the owner consents to have the animal sterilized prior to or in conjunction with redemption. Any animal impounded for a second time under this provision must be sterilized prior to redemption with no fees to be waived. So if they get out the second time and it looks like it's on its way to being chronic, then we will require that they be spayed or neutered. Then there's a change under item 6 about the penalties. The penalties provided shall not be waived by the department upon the transfer or abandonment of the dog or cat by the non-compliant owner. All penalties shall be imposed in addition to any other applicable civil or criminal penalties that may be imposed. And in the past, I think we've had people just abandon their animals to keep from having to pay the fees. So we basically just said that's not the option. It's still your responsibility.
So they pay whether they pick up the animal or not. So.
Right, or if they give it to somebody else, they say it's not my animal anymore, but it was your animal at the time of this.
Okay.
Then under item 7, it's kind of a housekeeping. The department, through its board, shall from time to time clarify and publish definitions of terms in this subsection, including but not limited to registry, recognized national association, actively used to show or compete, and so forth. So that goes back to some of the early questions about what the registries are. And then under the breeding code changes, under 1, any breeding permit holder shall implant each offspring born to a permitted animal with an animal identification device identifying the breeder and owner of the animal. Upon transfer of ownership of the animal, the identity of the breeder must remain listed along with the identity of the new animal. And we have checked with the microchip companies so that there is a place that you can always leave the breeder's name as well as a new owner's name if it's transferred. And then under also any breeding permit holder shall comply with all applicable local, state, federal requirements for humane standards of operation, maintenance, and housing of the animals, and shall be subject to inspection by the Los Angeles Department of Animal Services at its sole discretion. So if we have a concern about a breeder, we can go check it out and just ask to see what they've got happening and how their facilities look and how their animals look. And then under 3, we just under no circumstances shall such a permit be issued to a person who has been convicted of animal cruelty, abuse, or neglect, or a failure to obtain appropriate licenses or permits for the animal for which the breeding permit is being sought. So what I did was I went over the substantial changes to the code.
And that all sounds pretty reasonable, so I
Right.
have no further questions, and we'll pass that item at least on my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is someone here from disability now. Do you wish to go back to items 1 and 2?
Yes, if we have representatives, let's go back to item number 1 and 2.
For item 1, it deals with the exemption of 3 project coordinator positions and the re-exemption of 1 project coordinator for the Department of Disability. And a report has been submitted by the mayor's office.
I can talk about that. This is Tony Abraham, Department on Disability. I act as the budget and the office manager for the Department on Disability. Very much like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the ADA prohibits discrimination on certain dimensions of the population. For us, it's that dimension of disability. Our biggest concern is since the ADA was passed back in and been a few years now, we had put in place a transition plan to ensure that all departments were in compliance with ADA. We're believing that if we've done a needs assessment and lawsuits have arisen, that we need to go back through the transition plan again. That's been requiring us to also beef up our staff. I think the City Council has been fully updated that we are putting in place right now a voluntary compliance agreement with HUD, given issues that we have with both the CRA and housing. And also we have a number of lawsuits that's arising. One of them associated with sidewalks and ramps. And then there's other lawsuits that's been floating out there. We are seeing citizen involvement about trying to get the ADA enforced. We're hoping to put positions in place. One of those positions will be dealing with outreach to ensure that we are talking to the community, especially that community of advocates, that very much like advocates within HIV and AIDS. The other 2 positions are simply our regular ADA coordinators to ensure that we are talking to departments, updating the transition plan with all the departments, Rec and Park, Planning Department, to ensure that things are in place. And then another position we're looking at for a project coordinator is a sign language interpreter. We have 2 sign language interpreter contracts in place, but we wanted to have a staff interpreter available for emergency calls as well as for a person we have on our own staff. Item number 2, that is the dealing with the senior project coordinator position that we're looking to work with us as well as the mayor's office. That is a position dealing with the HUD, who made a declaration of formal noncompliance with funds that the city was actually receiving.
Okay, and these are obviously important positions. Why do they need to be exempt from civil service? My take is just that it's flexibility in hiring. I don't know if there's anything more to
No,
it.
that is, well, at least with 4 of the 5 positions we're looking at, that is the case. One of them, of course, is specialized sign language, which is very hard to find. And our concern is because we need to get going on this immediately, we want, like you just said, the flexibility in hiring someone, small pool that exists around with knowledge and subject matter expertise in ADA so they can get going on it.
Okay, well, I will approve item number 1 first, and then a couple questions with item number 2. Now, on item number 2, the position is set to report directly to the mayor's office. Why is it the mayor's office, and whose budget does the funding come out of? Is it disability or the mayor's office?
The funding is coming from the Department on Disability. The position will be in the mayor's office in order to have confidentiality, especially with the lawsuits arising. So any advice, expertise that's being provided will be covered by confidentiality if they're reporting to the mayor's office or the city attorney's office.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally understand why that is. Why would confidentiality be easier to maintain in the mayor's office than disability?
According to our city attorney's office, and I'll let the city attorney comment on that as well, the idea has been if they're reporting directly to the mayor's office, whatever is discussed or published, especially in the draft format, is confidential until the city council and the mayor's office make a declaration that they will wish to disclose it. They're concerned about the ongoing lawsuits that has arisen and may continue to arise right now. But That's the advice we had gotten from both the mayor's office.
Any more detail from the city attorney?
I'm not familiar with that
Okay.
advice request. If you could give me the name of the person that you have,
Okay.
we can follow up with them.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could get that information reported back to us. And also, we've added 5 positions that are exempt just in this one meeting.
Right.
If we could ask the CAO to come back to our next meeting with an update on how many positions, because there is obviously a maximum of 150, I believe. So we want to know how close we are towards pushing that cap, unless you're able to answer that today, in which case that would be perfect.
The current count is 117, so with the additional 5, it takes us to 122, and the max is 150.
Right, so not too bad, but obviously it's close enough that we should ask the CAO's office to keep a closer eye on that heading forward.
It's actually the personnel department that monitors
Okay,
the number of
yes.
exemptions.
Okay, well, in any case, obviously we should keep an eye on it. If we keep adding in batches, we could hit that ceiling very quickly and not leave ourselves any flexibility. So if we could get that other item back for a short report at our next meeting. And,
Actually, this is a time limit item, so if you don't disapprove it, I have to schedule it for council before the 17th.
Oh, I'm talking about approving it, but just for
Approving it.
information only, we'd like
Okay.
to have that information back.
Okay.
And so we will approve item 2 as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item 8, item
7?
7, yeah, item 7.
On item 7, the Personnel Department has submitted a report. It has to do with consolidated reasonable accommodations for employees with permanent work restrictions as a result of industrial or non-industrial injuries or illnesses. This is for the second quarter of fiscal year 2011-12.
Raylan Napper, Personnel Department. So this is a regularly recurring report. The Workers' Compensation Division of the Personnel Department tracks employees with industrial injury or illness, and they are tracking light duty hours, which are hours that injured employees are working in some capacity. IOD saved, which is the hours times their salary, because it means we're paying them to do something versus not being at work. And then IOD spent, which is money paid to the employee while they are recuperating at home. So we like to see light duty hours and IOD saved increase and IOD spent decrease. Attachment 1 shows this fiscal year and quarter 1 and quarter 2. And second quarter of this year compared to last fiscal year, we have an increase of about 16% of light duty hours worked, and an increase almost the same, a little over 15% in IOD saved. Those are positive trends. And then IOD spent increased by 21% from the prior year, but it went down from the prior quarter. So, okay, depending on how you look at it.
So IOD spent increased by $2.5 million?
Yes.
What's the reason for that? Is that a trend that we should be concerned about?
It's kind of hard to say sometimes. It's raises, it's cost of care. If you want any more detail, there's someone from the Workers' Compensation Division here.
Yeah, I wonder if we could get a little more detail on what these trends might mean for us in sort of layman's terms,
All right.
briefly.
Hi, I'm Beth
Hello.
Camarco with the Workers' Comp Division, Senior Management Analyst. I don't have anything specific either at this time, but we did notice a trend of the claims went up by almost 300 claims this past year, and just because there's a larger number of claims, we could see the IOD go up.
So any particular reason for that increase in claims?
No, it's been trending down for the last few years, and then this year, we did see the increase of 300 claims.
How do we look at that to determine whether there's actually something going on or whether it's just a random occurrence.
We can drill down a little bit more. Overall, it was the increases were seen in the sworn side for the most part, about 2 million, and then the remaining was in the civilian side. So we can drill down and look at some of the claims, specific claims, to see if there was any large ones out there.
Yeah, maybe you can come back at our next meeting with some analysis on that.
Okay.
Whether, especially if it's sworn, whether there's something going on in the police and fire departments, if there have been occurrences that have contributed to that, or if there are things that we could do to reverse that trend.
Okay.
And also, on attachment 2 of the report, it listed the number of reasonable accommodations made, granted, et cetera. And looking at the attachment, some of it was a little confusing. I believe it showed, for instance, that the personnel department received 2 requests from the fire department for reasonable accommodations, but granted 5. So some of these numbers don't totally add up.
Right, and so this is, again, over a period of 3 months, and actually the request, this attachment, the personnel department tracks and reports this, but these are requests internal to a department. So an employee goes to their department and says, I need an accommodation. And the reason why granted doesn't match the same number that came in is because there were some pending from the prior quarter that were then granted in this quarter. So it's always just flowing.
That makes some sense. And, those are all my questions.
All right.
Thank you both, and we will move that item forward with that report back as requested. Item number 8.
The Personnel Department has submitted a report relative to employee development and training programs offered to city employees during fiscal year 2010-2011.
Oh, and on that last item, I guess we formally need to note and file that report, although we will be asking for some information to come back.
Hi, I'm Michael Gold with the Personnel Department.
Also, Raylan Napper with the Personnel Department.
So we provided you with the annual training survey from 2010-2011, and I'll just go over it briefly. We provide, in the first part of it, courses that were provided by the Personnel Department. In the second part, we talk about training opportunities that departments provided to their own employees. And then we also provide a breakdown of mandated courses and compliance rates across the city. So regarding the courses that the Personnel Department offered during that fiscal year, we began our contract with a vendor to provide an online training academy. They provided us with a learning management system, and we started to develop 4 courses: customer service, supervision, reasonable accommodations, and EEO. With another vendor during that time, we provided sexual harassment training. Still another vendor provided workplace violence prevention training. There was we have an employee assistance program where employees were trained on a whole variety of topics. And then during that period of this report, we had layoffs. So there was 2 different types of layoff training. One for employees who were left behind to deal with the stress and coping of layoffs, and psychologists from the Personnel Department provided that training to about 1,200 employees. And then we also provided training to the employees who were actually laid off and provided them with assistance with benefits, medical services, retirement information, things like that. Okay, the next part of the report provides training that city departments offered to their own employees. And overall, we got information from 39 city departments, and they gave us the names of 2,298 training opportunities that they provided. I won't mention them all here. But the most popular topics were field-specific professional and technical training, safety training, and policy awareness training. And we also looked at the audiences for those trainings, and the most common audience was professionals, then skilled craft, and then technicians. And finally, those departments provided tuition reimbursement. There were 8 departments that provided tuition reimbursement to over 500 employees. And then in the last part of the report, we give you information on training that was mandated by the federal government or state government or by the city. 39 departments gave us information on that, and there were 626 courses that were mandated. Of those, we are in compliance with 411 of those courses, and there's some degree of non-compliance with the remaining 215 courses. And finally...
and these are all available online now?
No.
No.
The Online Training Academy provides courses offered by the Personnel Department, but the mandated training is a mix of both classroom training and online training, and that's offered by various city departments.
And how has the department started publicizing the opportunity to take these courses, especially the ones that are not mandated?
The Personnel Department is about to launch the Online Training Academy, where we're going to announce it to all general managers and personnel directors. And we also will be collaborating with departments so they could post their own content. So we're not just announcing it, but we're getting everybody involved to make sure that we have training on this system that is needed and wanted by people across the city.
So it hasn't happened yet, which is why most employees aren't aware of these being available, presumably.
The Online Training Academy has not officially been launched. It's been piloted in the Personnel Department. We're just working out a few last details, and it should be ready soon.
So my council staff took a workplace violence prevention program in a classroom-like setting. Do we have that online yet also, and could have been offered that way, or is that one, for example, not yet online?
That one is not currently in the works for an online presentation, but I think it certainly could be, it could lend itself to that, and that's something we could certainly look at.
The Personnel Department currently contracts with some experts in the field to provide that, as well as on-site help when things do arise or prevention. So.
Now, I know this city's administrative code provides for administration of a citywide tuition reimbursement program. How widespread has that been utilized, and is it publicized broadly yet?
Carolyn's going to take that.
You want me to go first?
Well, during this reporting period, there were 8 departments who were able to take advantage of that. But I don't believe the program is available for every employee in every city department. It was at one point, but more recently it's been limited to some special funded departments and other departments.
It's really a matter of funding, and years ago, that used to be funded in each department's budget. There's an account for that. When times got a little more austere, the council took the funding away for tuition reimbursement. So it's not very prevalent anymore. It's mostly found in the proprietary departments, but in the council-controlled departments, I'm not aware of a tuition reimbursement program existing anymore.
Do we anticipate that ever returns, or only if more flush times occur than we anticipate anytime soon?
That's probably a question we should be asking you, but yeah, I mean, obviously it's a matter of priorities and a policy decision. When you can't even fill positions, I think the priority for a lot of departments will be to increase staffing versus giving some tuition reimbursement to positions that are already there.
And,
Sadly, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
and just so you know, there is 1 or 2 MOUs that have arranged for tuition reimbursement. So there's that avenue for some people.
For specific purposes.
Right.
Very
right.
limited.
Very, more limited than just
More limited.
the tuition, the regular program.
And does it apply to non-reps? Are there any
No.
programs that non-reps are involved with, or no?
No.
Which departments are getting tuition reimbursement?
Do you remember the MOUs?
Oh, for the MOUs?
Mhm. Is it 30?
MOU 36.
I think it's
36.
MOU 36,
Yeah.
and there's, is it 37?
37, yeah.
And remind me which those apply to.
MOU 36 are higher level employees, chief management analysts, some AGMs.
Right.
And
There's some
37.
training, specific training funds for certain training purposes that are in the MOU, and I believe the programs are administered by the Personnel Department. But even when we did have tuition reimbursement, and I happened to be a recipient of that a very long time ago, it was still very limited. You'd get the equivalent of 1 unit of college, and it had to be, you were in a program that was applicable to a city job and that you could eventually promote into. So it wasn't like you received a whole year's worth of college tuition or anything like that. It was still very limited.
It was always a pretty modest program.
And
very modest. It's a
Pegged
good
to
way
the
to
Cal State rate. I believe.
Exactly. It was at the Cal State rate, and modest is a very good descriptor of that.
Okay, well, thank you, and we will note and file this report. I believe that is the last item on the agenda, other than one public comment slip that we have. That is from Phyllis Dougherty. Want to come up?
Phyllis Dougherty with Animal Issues Movement. I want to report to you something about the Best Friends arrangement at the Northeast Valley Shelter. They have been in there now since the first of the year without a kennel permit. Kennel permit requires that you have supervision at night for all the animals. Anyone who has a kennel with over 20 animals is mandated by city code to have supervision. I don't think that's asking too much when you have a lot of animals in close quarters like that you have someone there to keep an eye on them. Best Friends has not. Not only do we know that because of the inspections, but also because if you went out there and asked the guard that the city pays for to take care of the outside of the premises, you were told that there is no one inside. They've always had at least 100 dogs and 40 cats, but because that was what they were mandated by the city, but I understand they've had quite a few more. Finally, on July 25th, probably largely because I've been pushing with this CPRA, they just got a permit. 710 was when it was issued. That's really appalling. You were talking about the enforcement of the Spay Neuter Ordinance. It was not until they got the final notice to comply from this department. It was not done voluntarily. So I think you should look into that. You should also look into the number of animals that are being taken.
So you're saying they have the kennel permit now?
Finally, after 7 months. And the only reason was they did not want to have someone there at night because that would also subject them to inspection. So by not complying, they avoided both. But also another CPRA to just find out how many animals they've taken and how many licenses they have issued, which was the whole goal of this, has been unanswered for over 3 months, saying that the information was too difficult to obtain, although they are mandated in their contract to report that to the department every month. So I thought you might want to try. I'm asking for it, and I thought you might want to ask for it and find out what's going on, because when the animals leave the city's possession, their number is changed on them. Rather than continuing them so that they can be tracked and see what happens to our animals, they're taken free of charge. The number is changed, no microchip, and we have no idea what happens to them. And I understand there are huge transports going out all the time. So the numbers that you're getting on the drop in euthanasia and so forth and so on may be very misleading.
Thank you. And if there are no more speakers, this meeting is adjourned.